Welcome back. Last week, the Missouri State Legislature passed its newly redrawn maps, which reshapes Missouri's 5th congressional district to make it more conservative, minimizing the reelection chances of our next guest. Congressman Cleaver, thank you for joining us today. It's great to see you.
Good to be with you.
So I know this new map has not been made official yet, but Governor Kehoe of Missouri is expected to sign it into law soon. And I want to just give you a chance to react to that.
Well, first of all, I think that the whole process is unnecessary and creates a higher level of tension, not just in Missouri, but around the country when we end up doing things like this, like having a mid-decade redistricting. But the governor, as I understand it, is going to sign the legislation today. And I think it's going to end up in court. I think those who are handling the legal components of this little mess in Missouri believe that there were a number of extremely illegal components of the legislation. So we're going to try to deal with it in court after it's signed, and hopefully we can dispose of this so that Missouri can be taken off the scene of a messy winter coming up.
Well, I know you're not a lawyer, and you did say that you're hopeful that this will be tossed out in court. But I wonder, given the fact that there is precedent here, and this sort of thing has happened in both Republican and Democratic states, how optimistic you are that this will be thrown out.
Well, I am optimistic, but this has not occurred very many times in our history. Certainly not in Missouri. There have been some cases around the country. However, I think that I am optimistic because I think the White House rushed this map after they had designed it and sent it down to Missouri. And I think they were so quick to want to get this done that they made some careless errors, we believe, our lawyers believe. And I think we might have a good opportunity to get rid of it. And then we can go on with the business of trying to provide a governmental leadership in the state of Missouri.
And Congressman, if this map ultimately succeeds, obviously it impacts your 5th district in Missouri. How does this change your political calculations for a possible reelection, if at all?
Well, here, the thing is that this is not fair to the people of Missouri. It's not fair to the people in the urban core, and it's not fair to the people who live in the rural areas. People ought to be able to have some confidence that their representative is going to do everything they can do to respond to them. Well, the way they have this map designed, that's going to be difficult to do for some of the people. Now, I've represented rural parts of the state before, but this is a little different for people coming in to represent the urban area, where there may be some automatic distance between the Republican leadership and the desires of the people who live in the urban core, and not just minorities. People want to have some confidence that their representative is one of them, in the sense of understanding their issues and their knowledge, and who can live right there in the district and go down the street and talk to neighbors. And this is not the way to do it.
Well, you know that over in California, Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, of course, is also trying to defend their own redistricting efforts, saying things like Republicans fired the first shot. You're saying that it's wrong, so I guess I should ask if 2 wrongs make a right here.
No, it doesn't, but we're not going to have people doing what Texas did, what the governor did in Texas, and leaving that as something that should not be responded, and to which we're going to now respond from California. And then we're ready to respond in some other states as well. I don't particularly like it. It's fighting fire with fire. And if you continue to fight fire with fire, you're not only going to destroy this nation, you're going to also have nothing left but ashes. Fire and fire produces ash.
Well, we will be watching that firefight, Congressman. Before I let you go, I want to ask you quickly about the House voting on a continuing resolution tomorrow to avert a government shutdown. Now, I know it's not a Democratic plan, but are you considering voting in favor of it to avoid a shutdown?
No, I'm not going to vote in. I'm going to vote in favor of protecting the people I represent, and by that I mean we passed legislation previously, and it was signed by the President of the United States. And then a few weeks later, he decided, nah, I don't like the way it is, the language in these pieces of legislation, so I'm just going to cancel it out. And he then took the appropriations and started spending the money elsewhere. First time in modern history. And so there's nothing to say that he won't do another rescission, which is going to do nothing but create more chaos. It doesn't give the people in my congressional district an opportunity to benefit from the things that I would like to present to them after having legislated it successfully. Unless people understand that Republicans are shutting this down, we're in a minority. How are you going to blame the minority for shutting down any legislation? A 3-year-old can count. We're in the minority in the House and the Senate. And so the Senate is going to work with the House to shut down the legislation. And I think it's going to do enormous damage to the Republic. But the President of the United States has said that he didn't want them working with us. And here we are right now, just a couple of days from the chaos, and the President has said there can be no dialogue, there can be no negotiations. That's not American, and we're going to see the whole nation suffer as a result of this kind of childish role that the President's playing over here with the legislative bodies.
All right, we have to leave it there, Congressman Cleaver. Thank you so much for your time today.